You're listening to the Happier Marriage Podcast, and this is episode number 5. What we'll be discussing on this episode is the secret to a happier marriage. Not only the secret, but the number one secret to a happier marriage will be revealed on this episode. And here it is. It may not be what you think. Now, as you listen and as the secret is revealed, I want you to grade yourself as to how well you are doing as it pertains to the secret. Also, make sure you bookmark this podcast as your top resource for insights on having a happier marriage. Stay tuned. Hi, I'm Kingsley Grant, a licensed marriage and family therapist, certified relationship coach, and an in-demand speaker who have been married for over 3 decades with 2 adult children. I'm also the founder and CEO of Helping Families Improve, a counseling center that caters to helping families experience the life God intended for them to have. So how do we have a happier marriage where love, respect, and deep connection takes place? That's what you'll find out as you listen to the Happier Marriage Podcast. What's up, ladies and gentlemen of Happier Marriage Nation? I hope you're ready for another round of the Happier Marriage Podcast. This episode might trigger you because it will hit close to home. But that's one of the purpose of this show, right? To stir things up and then to take you in for a safe landing. Hey, by the way, if you heard me mention Happier Marriage Nation, if that's something that resonates, if you had some idea of how you prefer me to refer to you as part of a movement, how would you frame that? What 2 or 3 words would you use to help me with that? So I'm looking for your help. So I'm open to whatever suggestion you might have. Now let's buckle up, and here we go as we reveal the number one secret to a happier marriage. And again, it may not be what you think. I'm going to ask you this question up front. I know you can't speak back to me as you listen, but you could also write to me. You could respond where you say this post. You could respond with a feedback. So you have a way to communicate with me, right? You do. So I would love to hear from you whether what you're going to hear is what you thought about. Now, be honest. Now, I'm trusting that you're an honest person. So if you want to just be upfront and say, hey, here is what I thought it was until you revealed what you stated as the number one secret. Here's what I was thinking. And let me just play a little game with that and see how close you were. It may not be the same wording that you have, but it may be something close enough that I would say, hey, you know what? If I had to give a prize, you would get the prize for the fact that you came the closest. So make sure you reach out to me through you can direct message me on any social media platform at Kingsley Grant, or you can send me an email at podcast@kingslegrant.com, podcast@kingslegrant.com. So I'd love to hear from you. And also make sure that you, on the platform that you're listening, that you give a rating and a feedback. I would love those 5-star rating. I would really appreciate that. It would help the show to be found easier by those who are looking for it, right? You got me on that one. Okay, so what's the number one secret to a happier marriage? As I reveal this, again, I'm asking you to think about what you may have thought about. So I give you enough time to think about to bring in your thoughts of what you think it is. And let's compare notes. Now, after I share that with you, I'm going to give you ways of how you could possibly make this secret true in your relationship. Okay? Now, here is a number one secret to a happier marriage. Countdown, drum roll. Dum, 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 dum. Okay, here it is. Build a surplus into the relationship bank account. Build a surplus into your relationship bank account. So Kingsley, what does that mean? Well, let me just take you to in the area of finances. You have a bank account. I hope you do. Now, for that bank account to give you a chance to use it for expenses and so on, what do you have to do on a regular basis? You have to make deposits. Now, unless you have won the lottery and that's the only one deposit you make and you're drawing from that. But here's what I know. At some point, that money will run out unless you replace it, right? Unless you keep on replacing what you're taking out. You know, I grew up in Jamaica, and one of the phrases I grew up with is, every day if you carry a bucket to the well, one day, how did it go now? If you carry the bucket to the well, one day the bottom will drop out. Something like that. Now, this was made popular, of course, by the late Bob Marley, but it was a Jamaican, one of those phrases that you grew up hearing. And Bob Marley says, every day the bucket I go a well, one day the bottom I go drop out. Now, please don't you shoot the messenger. If I didn't say it the right way, if I misquoted it, please do not shoot the messenger. Have mercy on me. Say, Kingsley, come on, you should know that. I don't remember it, my friend. If I did, I would have just gotten it right out I wouldn't have to look it up. And I'm being very transparent here. I'm looking it up so I can give that to you, right? Now, what does that have to do with anything? Maybe nothing. But I was making the point that if you keep on withdrawing, one day the bank account is going to get into the red. You'll have insufficient fund, and whatever you send to the account will be sent back because of an insufficient fund, right? And I don't want to get into the whole financial thing here. That's not what the whole show is about. So the point is, when I say build a surplus in the relationship bank account, imagine making deposits into your bank account, and you keep on putting in things so you can always withdraw when you need. The more money you have in your account, the better you feel. The more secure you feel about the fact that you have money. And so in cases of emergency or emergencies, you have access to cash on hand, right? Unless the bank shuts you down and don't give you access to your money, then then you have a problem. And we've seen that happen before, especially during the pandemic in some countries. One in particular I'm thinking about in Canada. There are certain people that were tagged or they were marked, right, that they could not access their money. The bank went along with the government and allowed them to put this in place where if you didn't go along with their agenda and their policies, you could not access your own money. That's scary, right? That's scary. And that's a whole different story here. But I'm just pointing is in essence, in normal things, all things being equal, you should be able to access your money that you've deposited, and you can make a withdrawal and still feel like you are not getting, having going paranoid or a panic attack because you have money and you can withdraw when an emergency occurs. So think of your relationship that way, that making deposits into your relationship, because there's sometimes an emergency will occur. The emergency could look different. It could look different for every relationship. But imagine that emergency being something that is offensive, something that hurt the relationship. Now, I'm not speaking about any kind of, really egregious kind of hurt where it's very personal attacks. It's, it could be physical. It could be an affair. I'm not talking about those extreme situations, right? I'm just speaking about life as it happens in any marriages. They have its up and down, and every single marriage is going to encounter at some point some kind of hurt that was not meant. And sometimes in the heat of the moment, something happens. If the bank account of the relationship doesn't have enough deposits, it won't be able to sustain that kind of emergency, right? Where someone can overlook and give you a pass and show you some grace because they know this is a mishap. This is not the norm. This is not how things normally happen in the relationship. And they can give you a pass. They can, at least show you some mercy and grace because you have built up enough in the bank account. Now, I'm going to give you some practical ways of how that looks and how that's done. Okay. Now, when I say build up a surplus into the relationship bank account, here are some ways that you can build or make deposits into your relationship bank account. For example, when you speak your spouse's love language, that is one way to build up, to make deposits. So you say, Kingsley, what's love language? Well, according to author Gary Chapman, who kind of coined the phrase love languages, he talks about 5 love languages. And he talks about love language being words of affirmation. It could be gifts. It could be quality time. It could be acts of service. And it could be physical touch, right? Affection. So those are the 5 major categories he talks about and identify in relationships. And he says every one of us have a dominant love language. That means that's how we interpret love. How we feel loved, cared for, is when somebody is using one of those 5 ways that we feel love and giving that to us. So for example, my love language is words of affirmation. My wife, she buy me gifts. Okay. She's the one who does most of my clothes shopping. I'm going to put it out there. And so I'm just being what it is. I just don't like shopping. I just don't like going to the mall. And I want to go in, get out, and get back home. I don't want to do the mall thing, the shopping thing. I don't have much patience for that. So thank God my wife, on the other hand, she doesn't mind, and she'll go and spend hours and whatever it is. And she knows what I wear. She knows my likes and my taste, and she gets most of my clothes. And so I have no shame, and I'm giving her credit for that. Okay. Does a great job. And my daughter also, she will help give some ideas because she has a fashion eye. So, but anyway, my love language is words of affirmation. So even though my wife get me those gifts, I appreciate them. I really do. And she may also do something for me, and I appreciate that. I very much do so, and I tell her thanks. However, it doesn't move the needle as much as when she give me a word of affirmation. So, Kingsley, what's that? Well, for example, when I cut the grass, I like to, on weekends, get out there and do something totally different from what I do Monday through Friday. And so what's therapeutic for me is to put my headphones in, my earbuds in, and listen to podcasts or an audiobook, right, while I'm cutting the grass. And I think I do a very good job. So when she says to me, honey, that the yard looks so beautiful, great job, that's a word of affirmation. That is speaking my language. And in a sense, that's what I kind of fish for sometimes. I say, honey, did you see the yard? Right? Because that's my love language. I know she notices, and is a way of saying to me, wow, good job. I affirm you. Her love language is physical touch, right? And so for me, that is not my dominant, as you just heard me say. Now, when I deposit by somehow at times I'll hug her, or just do any physical touch, right? Say, put my hand on her when I'm talking to her, put my hand in her hair, just stand beside her close and touch her shoulders, whatever it is. That is a way for her to know that I care and that I love her. That's her love language. So imagine then that as a deposit. The more of that I do, the more I'm deposited in the bank account of the relationship. The more of what she does, words of affirmation, is deposited in the relationship bank account. So that if something happens from her to me or me to her, we have something in the bank account that can sustain whatever just happened, right? So speaking your spouse's love language is one of those ways. And I won't spend too much time on the rest because I think you're getting the idea. Another way is listening to your spouse, listening to understand, right? Not listening to speak, but listening to understand. When your spouse feels listened to, they also see that as a deposit because they're simply saying you care of what they have to say. You are not dismissing them. They're valued. They're important because they're saying something, and you listen to that, right? And there's a way to be effective in listening, and there's some skills that are employed that we won't have time to go through, but those are some things I will cover in the future. Also in the program I'm working on, they'll be covered there. Some of these things will also be covered there, but listening to understand. Here's another way. When you acknowledge your spouse, acknowledge when you're wrong and request forgiveness. So sometimes I find spouses, a husband or a wife, may want to remain right and never acknowledge they're wrong. It's almost like, yes, I did this because you did that. I wouldn't have done this unless you did that, right? So it's almost blaming. And blame is one of those things that can really hurt your relationship in the long run very quickly. And I can tell you one thing, it will not let you experience a happier marriage. So when you acknowledge when you're wrong and request forgiveness, right? Genuinely request forgiveness. Ask for forgiveness for what it is you did. The person needs to know, what are you asking for forgiveness for? That needs to be stated. That's another way to build the account of the relationship. Regular dates is another way. When you on a weekly basis or bi-weekly basis, I would suggest weekly, find a time where you go with your spouse on a date. And it could be for coffee, for tea, for dinner, for lunch, for breakfast, something where you take time out. And it's just not hit or miss, is where you actually plan it. This is a big way for the relationship to know that you care and you're thinking about the welfare of the relationship. That's a way to make a deposit into the relationship. I'll give you one more. Be respectful to your spouse. I cannot tell you how when disrespect is in a relationship, and you know that if you've ever felt disrespected, you know what I'm talking about. When you feel disrespected, man, it can hurt the relationship. But when you show respect and you're respectful in your words, I find some couples sometimes it blows my mind how they will call the way they would refer to their spouse, a husband to his wife, a wife to her husband, words, calling them names and making reference to them in words that I can't even say on this. I won't say, not I can't, but I won't say on anyway in a public setting. But they will call their wife or their husband names that are like, man, are you serious? That's your wife. That's your husband. But they speak to them in a way that as if they're speaking to a dog or just to, something that just don't have any care for. But it's a human being. It's a person, but not even more so. It's your husband. It's your wife. So if you want to make deposits, be respectful in the way you interact with your spouse. It's a great way to make deposits. So I'll just share with you a few ways that you can make deposits. And these are things that I believe when you're doing that, it's the number one way to build a surplus into the relationship bank account, your relationship bank account. And so when something happened, like I mentioned earlier, at least there's room for withdrawal. There's a room where at least you have a buffer where things will land. Imagine like you have a cistern, right? A canister. It's made out of, say a copper canister. And it's like a vase, right? A deep vase. And you drop some coins inside there. You're hearing that thing just bounce around inside that copper vase, right? Because there's nothing in it. Now imagine putting some, inside that vase, some sponge and cloth and so on in the bottom or even halfway up of that vase, right? Or say water, for example. And you drop that nickel or that say a dime or a quarter or just any coin inside there. You notice the difference, right? Why? Because there's a deposit that buffers the sound. And that's what happens in relationships, my friend. You want that sound buffered. So the number one secret to a happier marriage that you may not have thought about is building a surplus into your relationship bank account. Okay. So I hope this is helpful. I think it is. And my friend, I want to hear from you. Make sure that you reach out to me, as I mentioned earlier, on any social media at Kingsley Grant, or you can send me an email, podcast@kingslegrant.com. But also, my friend, can I ask you this, that the platform which you're listening to this episode, give me a rating, a 5-star. I would love that. Okay. But a review, just something you think about that helps the show. And share this with another couple, right? Share this with another family that you know could benefit from this. Help me spread the word around. I really greatly appreciate that. And thank you so very much for doing that. My friend, thank you for taking the time to listen. I really appreciate that. We've come to the end of another incredible, fast-paced, hard-hitting episode. And I hope you thought about it that way as well. Here's my blessings on you. May God bless you and keep you. May he let his face shine upon you and be gracious to you and your spouse. And may he lengthen your days and grant you what your heart desire, a happier marriage, both now and forever. Amen. God bless you, my friend. With that said, peace out, God bless, and I'll see you on the flip side. Yeah.